My mom told me, women don't need careers. Better find a good husband. My dad nodded along. So I built my own life in secret. All along, they funded my brother's dreams. Everyone failed. They never asked about mine. Then he had a breakdown. They were losing everything. They came to me for help. Sure, I'd say yes. But I had conditions. My nephew called begging, "Aunt Rachel, please, you're our only hope." My brother was in a psychiatric ward. His wife left. My parents were about to lose their house. They needed $250,000. For the first time in my life, they needed me. The one they never believed in. The one they never helped. And now I was the only one who could save them. Let me explain. Growing up, my parents funded every business my brother started. Everyone failed. When I asked for tuition help, Mom laughed. Women don't need careers. Better find a good husband. So I worked 3 jobs through college, slept in my car some nights. When I graduated top of my class, they skipped my ceremony for his wife's baby shower. They gave him $450,000 over the years. Never once asked about me, but I built anyway, in secret. They thought I worked some boring bank job. I was a vice president, corner office, 34th floor, Manhattan, $1.84 million I'd earned on my own. Now they were begging. They came expecting I'd just say yes. Write a check. Forget all the injustice I'd lived with my whole life. But no, I didn't say yes. I opened my briefcase, pulled out 9 pages, set them on the table. "I'll give you the money," I said. "Every penny. But first, you're going to read these." My father picked up the first page. His face went white. "You can't be serious," he said. 48 hours to decide. All 9 conditions, or find another way. Let me show you exactly what happened in that room. The family meeting was arranged for Saturday at 2 o'clock in my parents' living room, the same room where Derek's business ventures had been celebrated for 3 decades. I arrived exactly on time, and my mother opened the door and immediately pulled me into a hug. "Thank God you're here, Rachel," she said. "We've been going through everything, trying to figure out how to help Derek. How to help Derek, not whether to help." The assumption that I'd comply was built into the sentence itself. My father sat in his recliner with a yellow legal pad covered in calculations, while Derek's wife Vanessa perched on the couch, rigid with barely contained fury. My nephew Ryan sat in the corner, watching me with desperate hope. The coffee table was buried under financial documents, bank statements, mortgage papers, medical bills, and legal notices stacked in messy piles. "Rachel," my father said, picking up the legal pad, "we've run the numbers multiple times, and the total to solve everything is around $250,000. He started reading through the list. Foreclosure on both houses, psychiatric treatment, lawyers for the divorce, school tuition, first and last month's rent. The numbers kept coming. I let him finish. "Your mother and I can contribute $40,000 from what's left of our retirement," he said. "That leaves about $210,000 we need to cover." He looked at me directly. "We figure if you liquidate your savings and maybe take out some loans, you should be able to handle most of that." Liquidate my savings. Take out loans. Handle most of it. My mother leaned forward. "We've also been thinking it might make sense for you to move back here temporarily to help coordinate Derek's recovery and manage the family finances for a while." I looked at the walls while she talked, and I saw photos everywhere. Derek's school pictures from kindergarten through college hung beside his wedding photos and pictures of his children, along with a professional shot from his first business launch party. I counted 4 photos of me among the dozens: 1 high school graduation shot, 1 family vacation when I was 12, and 2 group shots where I was half hidden behind relatives. "This isn't optional, Rachel," my mother said, her voice sharp. "Family takes care of family." I let the silence stretch for a long moment, then I opened my briefcase. "Before we discuss what I'm willing to do," I said, "I think you need to understand what I'm actually capable of doing." I pulled out a folder and handed the first page to my father. "This is my checking account," I said. "Current balance, $127,000. He frowned. "That's very responsible savings." I handed him the second document. "This is my primary investment portfolio. Current value, $1.84 million. The room went completely silent. My mother's mouth opened and closed several times before she finally spoke. "I don't understand. You work at a bank. You do something with loans." "I'm a vice president at one of the largest hedge funds in the country," I said. "I manage more money than this entire family will ever see. Last year I made $765,000. I handed over my tax return, my employment contract, and a net worth statement from my financial advisor. My family stared at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" my father whispered. I looked at him. "When did you ask?" The question hung in the air, and nobody had an answer. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a 9-page document. "I'm willing to provide assistance," I said, "but not on your terms. If you want my help, this is what it looks like." I set it on the table. Condition 1. My father picked up the page. "Any money I provide is a formal loan, not a gift. Principal amount, $250,000, with an interest rate of 4% annually and a repayment term of 15 years. Monthly payment, $1,849. He looked up. Alone? We're family, Rachel. Family. Right. I leaned back in my chair. Let me tell you about family. When Derek turned 16, you bought him a brand new Mustang, midnight blue with a red bow on the hood. You told him he'd earned it, even though he had a C average and had never worked a day in his life. When I turned 16, I got a card on the kitchen table. When I asked about help with a used car so I could drive to my after-school job, Mom said we weren't made of money. Derek got a $28,000 car for existing. I got a card. My father's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. When Derek went to college, you paid $185,000 over 4 years. Tuition, dorm, spending money, spring break trips, monthly visits, and credit card bills whenever he overspent on what he called networking events. When I got into Northwestern, one of the top universities in the country, Mom barely looked at the acceptance letter. She said you'd already stretched yourselves for Derek because he was the one with the business mind. I worked 3 jobs that summer: cashier in the mornings, warehouse at night, and lawn care on weekends. I took out $67,000 in student loans, ate ramen 4 nights a week, and never bought a single textbook I could find in the library. You didn't attend my orientation because Derek had a pitch meeting with investors. So yes, a loan with interest, because family apparently means different things to different people. My mother was crying now. We didn't know, Rachel. We didn't know you were struggling. You didn't ask. I flipped to the next page. Condition 2. The funds will be dispersed in stages tied to specific milestones. Stage 1, $50,000 immediately, which covers Derek's continued treatment, stops the school from disenrolling the children, and keeps both houses out of foreclosure temporarily. Stage 2, remaining mortgage arrears paid only after Derek completes his inpatient program and has an approved outpatient treatment plan. Stage 3, legal fees and remaining funds released only after Derek demonstrates 90 days of consistent therapy attendance and medication compliance. My father shook his head. That's a lot of hoops for helping your own brother. Less complicated than losing both houses and having your son attempt suicide? Again, I let that land for a moment before continuing. Condition 3. Derek completes a comprehensive financial literacy program within 6 months of discharge. In person, accredited, with proof of completion. 4 businesses, Dad. You funded 4 businesses over 20 years. Total investment, $450,000. Total revenue across all 4, $52,000. Total profit, negative $398,000. He didn't learn financial responsibility because he never had to. Every time he failed, you gave him more money, and every time he burned through cash, you refinanced something and handed him another check. This condition ensures that changes. My father said nothing. Condition 4. I looked at both of them. This entire family enters therapy together, all of us, weekly sessions for a minimum of 12 months. My mother's face twisted. You want us to air our dirty laundry to some stranger? Our dirty laundry created a situation where your son almost killed himself, and your grandson had to beg your estranged daughter for help through a text message. I kept my voice even as I continued. You want to know why I never told you about my career? Why I dressed down at holidays and changed the subject whenever anyone asked about work? Because I learned a long time ago that you didn't actually want to know. I was 22 when I graduated magna cum laude from Northwestern with a double major in finance and economics and a job offer from Goldman Sachs. I walked across that stage looking for your faces in the crowd. You weren't there. I called Mom that night and she said you couldn't make it because Derek's wife was having a baby shower. Family comes first, she told me. Family comes first. Unless that family was me. 3 weeks later, Derek's first business failed. $85,000 of your money gone in 18 months. You consoled him for a month, took him to dinners, and told him failure was just a stepping stone to success. 3 months after that, you refinanced the house and gave him $95,000 for his second venture. Nobody ever mentioned my graduation again. My mother was sobbing now, and my father just stared at the table without saying a word. So yes, family therapy. Because something is broken in how this family works, and none of us know how to fix it alone. Condition 5. At the next extended family gathering, you will publicly acknowledge the pattern of favoritism that shaped this family for 3 decades. My father stood up abruptly. This is extortion. You're using your brother's crisis to humiliate us. I didn't move from my seat. I'm offering $250,000 to solve problems I didn't create. The conditions ensure this isn't just another bailout that enables the same patterns. If they're too steep, you're free to find other solutions. He stood there with his fist clenched, his face red. Sit down, Dad. He sat. The public acknowledgement isn't about humiliation. It's about truth. 37 relatives watched you favor Derek my entire life. They watched you celebrate his failures and ignore my successes. And they watched without saying anything. 3 years ago at Thanksgiving dinner, I mentioned I'd just bought a place, paid cash after 8 years of saving. Mom barely paused before saying, "That's nice, Rachel. Now, Derek, tell us more about your marketing budget." 5 seconds. That's how long my achievement lasted before the conversation circled back to him. So yes, public acknowledgement, because the whole family needs to hear what you're finally willing to admit. Condition 6. Written letters to Aunt Linda, Uncle Frank, Aunt Carol, and any other relatives you've discussed this with, acknowledging the favoritism and acknowledging that my success was built without your support. My mother looked up. Everyone will think we're terrible parents. Everyone will think accurately about how you parented. I kept my voice steady. The embarrassment you're feeling right now is exactly what I felt at every family gathering where my achievements were invisible, every Christmas where Derek's latest venture got an hour of discussion while my promotion got a nod. Now you'll know what that feels like. The last 3 conditions. I looked at Ryan in the corner. 7. Ryan and Lily's educational needs get prioritized. Separately, I'm establishing a $50,000 trust for them, funded by me, independent of whether this family ever changes. Ryan's eyes went wide. 8. Equal treatment going forward. No more secret loans to Derek without equivalent offers to me. Not that I need it, but the principle matters. 9. When I get married, buy a house, have children, you match what you gave Derek. His wedding cost $68,000. His house down payment was $45,000. Match those, adjusted for inflation, or publicly acknowledge you're choosing not to. I closed the folder. These conditions are non-negotiable. Accept all of them or find another way to solve your problems. You have 48 hours. My father's face was red. You're punishing us. No, I'm setting the terms for a relationship with someone who finally learned her own value. I stood up. You spent 30 years teaching me I was worth less than my brother, that my needs didn't matter, that my achievements deserved dismissal while his failures deserved celebration. These conditions aren't punishment, they're the price of admission. I picked up my briefcase. 48 hours. I walked out. They called in 36 hours. All 9 conditions, accepted. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I poured wine I didn't drink and stared at city lights that blurred when I wasn't careful. 2 weeks later, I was walking into a psychiatric ward to see my brother. The psychiatric ward smelled like industrial cleaner and bad coffee. Derek sat in the common room in hospital scrubs, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him, broken, but somehow more real than he'd ever been. Rachel, he said. He didn't seem surprised. Ryan said you're the reason I'm still here. Financially, yes. He nodded slowly. I heard about the conditions, all 9 of them. Mom called crying and said you were being cruel. Dad called angry and said you were taking advantage. He looked at his hands. They're wrong. He met my eyes. You're the first person who's ever treated this family's problems like they're actually problems, instead of just phases Derek's going through. I didn't know what to say, so I waited. I'm sorry, Rachel. Not the kind of sorry where I expect you to say it's okay. The kind where I actually understand what I took from you. He leaned back and stared at the ceiling. When I was 20, I genuinely believed I was special, that success was just finding the right idea, having people believe in me enough. Mom and Dad told me that my whole life. You're destined for great things, Derek. You have the entrepreneurial spirit. You just need the right opportunity. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I believed them, and why wouldn't I? Every time I failed, they told me it wasn't my fault. Bad timing, wrong market, ahead of the curve. There was always an excuse that kept the dream alive. I thought about all the dinners where they'd consoled him, all the checks they'd written, all the times they'd said the next one would be different. He shook his head. 4 businesses over 20 years. Total revenue, $52,000. Total profit, negative $398,000. 2 bankruptcies. I'm 42 years old and my entire career is one long expensive failure. He looked at me directly. But you know what the worst part is? It's not the money, and it's not the businesses. It's that I wasted 20 years chasing something I was never going to catch because nobody ever told me I didn't have to be extraordinary. Nobody ever said it was okay to be ordinary. Something in my chest loosened. I'd spent 30 years being angry at Derek, but sitting here looking at him in hospital scrubs, I realized he'd been trapped too, just a different kind of trap. He leaned forward. Except you. You never tried to be extraordinary. You just built. Quietly, steadily. While I was pitching investors and burning through cash, you were working 3 jobs and sleeping in your car. While I was declaring bankruptcy, you were getting promoted. He stared at the floor. I'm not an entrepreneur, and I never was. I was just a guy whose parents kept telling him he was special until he believed it so deeply that he couldn't survive being ordinary. He looked at me again. You know what I realized in here, with nothing to do but think? I've been jealous of you my whole life. I blinked. Jealous. You built something real through discipline and work and actually being good at something. Nobody handed it to you and nobody told you that you deserved it for existing. He gestured around the ward. I'm 42 and I have nothing I built myself. Everything came from someone else's money and someone else's belief in a version of me that doesn't exist. His voice cracked. That's what broke me. Not the business failing, and not Vanessa leaving. It was the realization that I'd spent 4 decades being a character in a story our parents wrote, and I never figured out who I actually was. We sat in silence for a long time, while a nurse walked past and someone laughed in a distant room. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The conditions, he finally said, the therapy, the financial course, the public acknowledgement. They're going to be hard. Yes, he nodded. Good. I think hard is what I need. The family therapy started 6 weeks later. Dr. Okafor's office was warm and neutral. The first session was 90 minutes of careful circling, with everyone testing boundaries and nobody saying what they meant. Session 3 broke something open. Dr. Okafor asked my mother to describe a specific memory of treating Derek and me differently. Not a defense, not an explanation, just a memory. Long silence filled the room. When Rachel got into Northwestern, my mother finally said, barely audible. She came home with the acceptance letter, and I was on the phone with someone Derek wanted me to call. Some investor contact. She stopped. Rachel stood there with the envelope, and I made her wait. 20 minutes, maybe 30. She started crying. When I finally looked at it, I said something about needing to help Derek with his pitch. I didn't throw a party or call relatives or even put it on the refrigerator. She looked at me. My daughter got into one of the best universities in the country, and I treated it like junk mail. She wiped her eyes. I don't know how many moments like that there were. Hundreds, probably. Times I made you wait, times I changed the subject. Times I looked right through you because I was focused on Derek. She took a breath. I told myself you didn't need the attention, that you were independent, that Derek was the one who needed support. She shook her head. But that's not what I was doing. I was choosing him, over and over, and telling myself it wasn't a choice. I thought we'd turned a corner. Then session 5 happened. Dr. Okafor asked my parents to discuss the public acknowledgement condition, the letters to relatives, the Christmas speech. My mother's face hardened into something I recognized. From 30 years of holidays. I don't see why we need to involve everyone else, she said. What happens in this room should stay in this room. My father nodded. We've admitted what we did, to you and to each other. Isn't that enough? Do we really need to humiliate ourselves in front of the entire family? I felt something cold in my chest. These conditions are non-negotiable, I said. You agreed to them. My father leaned forward. We agreed under duress. You held $250,000 over our heads, and we would have agreed to anything. So you don't actually believe you did anything wrong. You're just going through the motions. Silence. My mother looked at the floor while my father looked at the ceiling, and neither of them looked at me. Dr. Okafor tried to redirect, talking about accountability and healing and the difference between shame and guilt. My parents nodded in the right places and said the right words. But I'd seen it. The flash of resentment, the instinct to protect their reputation over repairing our relationship. I drove home that night and sat in my car for 20 minutes. James found me there, staring at nothing. What happened? He asked through the window. I thought they were changing, I said. I thought the conditions were working, but they're just performing, going through the motions until they can go back to normal. What are you going to do? I didn't know. I could pull the funding, walk away, let them lose everything. But then I thought about Ryan and Lily and Derek, who was actually trying. The next morning, I called my attorney and had him draft an addendum to the loan agreement. If my parents failed to complete the public acknowledgement by the 6-month mark, the interest rate would increase from 4% to 12%. I sent it to them with a single line. The conditions are not negotiable. My father called that evening, furious. You're treating us like deadbeats. You're borrowers who tried to renegotiate after signing. That's how borrowers get treated. He hung up on me. 2 weeks later, session 6 happened and something was different. My father had been quiet for weeks, defensive, full of justifications about giving Derek what he'd never had from his own father. But this time, when Dr. Okafor asked him a question, he didn't deflect. Frank, Dr. Okafor said, why did you believe Derek needed so much more support than Rachel? Silence. Because he reminded me of my father. He stared at the floor. My dad was a dreamer. Big ideas, big plans, never made them work. He died when I was 23, still talking about the business he was going to start. Broke, bitter, full of regret. He looked up. I swore I'd do better by my son. If he had the same dreams, I'd fund them. I'd believe in him. I'd make sure he didn't die with unfulfilled potential. And Rachel? Dr. Okafor asked gently. Rachel was different, practical, responsible. She didn't seem to need help. Or she needed a different kind of help, Dr. Okafor said. Recognition, celebration, the belief that her path was just as valuable. Long silence. I spent 30 years trying to save Derek from becoming my father, Dad finally said. And I never noticed I was treating Rachel exactly the way my father treated my mother and sisters. Like their achievements didn't count. Like they existed to support men's dreams. He looked at me directly. I'm sorry, Rachel. Not sorry, like I expect forgiveness. Sorry, like I finally understand what I did, and I hate myself for it. I'll never know if the addendum scared him into genuine reflection, or if he would have gotten there anyway. But I know this. For 2 weeks, After session 5, I was ready to walk away, ready to let 30 years of patterns convince me that people can't change. Sometimes the hope has to die before the real work can begin. The public acknowledgement came at Christmas, 11 months after Derek's hospitalization, 37 relatives at Aunt Linda's house, the same living room where Derek's ventures had been celebrated for decades, the same family that had watched me be overlooked without saying anything. My father stood after dinner. I need to say something to everyone here. Something I should have said years ago. The room went quiet. For 30 years, we treated Derek like he was destined for greatness, and Rachel like she was an afterthought. We funded his dreams and ignored hers. We celebrated his failures and dismissed her successes. We told her directly that her ambitions didn't matter because she was a woman. His voice cracked. We were wrong about all of it. He looked at me. Rachel built a career more successful than anything Derek or I ever imagined. She did it completely alone. When our family fell apart this year, she saved us. With conditions, yes. With accountability. But also with love we didn't deserve. He raised his glass. I'm sorry, Rachel. In front of everyone who watched us favor Derek for 3 decades, I'm saying, we failed you. The woman you became isn't because of us. It's despite us. My mother stood next. And for the record, she said, voice thick, women absolutely need careers, especially when they're better at them than anyone else in the room. Afterward, 3 aunts approached me, along with 2 cousins and an uncle. They'd all noticed and all seen it, but they'd all said nothing. I should have spoken up, Aunt Linda said, hugging me. I watched it happen and stayed silent because it wasn't my place. That was wrong. 2 years after Derek's hospitalization, the transformation was undeniable. Derek had stabilized on medication, completed outpatient therapy, and finished the financial literacy course with the highest score in his cohort. He'd found a job, not a startup, not a venture, but inventory management at a regional hardware chain. It paid $52,000 a year with benefits and regular hours. I thought I'd hate it, he told me over coffee. Punching a clock, taking orders, doing the same thing every day. He stirred his drink, but I don't hate it. I'm actually good at it, and my boss says I'm one of his best hires. I go home at 5 and sleep through the night for the first time in 15 years. He looked up. I think I actually like being ordinary. I think I always would have if anyone had let me try. The loan payments came like clockwork. Initially, they were split between Derek and my parents at $925 each. But after his first year of steady employment, Derek took over the full $1,849. He never missed once. After 18 months, he started adding extra, $100 here, $200 there. I want this done, he said, not because I can't afford it, but because every payment is a reminder of who I was. And every extra payment is proof I'm becoming someone different. My parents downsized. They sold the house they'd almost lost and moved to a 2-bedroom condo. My mother joined a book club and started volunteering at a literacy center, while my father took up woodworking in the garage. They came to visit my office once, and I gave them a tour, the trading floor, the corner office, the framed Wall Street Journal article on my wall. My mother stood at the window for a long time. You built all this, she said quietly. Without us, despite us. Yes. She turned. I used to think success looked like Derek. Confidence, big ideas, the certainty that something great was around the corner. She shook her head. I didn't recognize that real success looks like this. Quiet, competent, built slowly year after year, while nobody was paying attention. She took my hand. I'm proud of you, Rachel. I should have said it every day for 30 years. I'm saying it now. Ryan got into Northwestern the following fall for pre-med, and the Educational Trust covered everything. When he got the acceptance letter, my parents threw him a party. Then my mother did something unexpected. She threw me a party too. Retroactive, 33 years late. She hung a Northwestern banner and ordered a cake that said magna cum laude, and she framed photos of my graduation to display alongside Derek's old business launch pictures. I know it's too late, she said, eyes wet. I can't give you back what I took, but I wanted you to see what we should have done. It was awkward and strange and somehow perfect. James proposed on an ordinary Tuesday in our apartment, with takeout Thai food and a ring he'd spent months choosing. I said yes before he finished asking. When I told my parents, they offered to contribute $68,000, matching what they'd given Derek for his wedding, adjusted for inflation as Condition 9 had required. It's not about the money, my mother said, her hands shaking as she gave me the check. It's about finally being fair. I accepted. The equality was the gift. The engagement dinner was small, just family, James's parents, Ryan, and Lily. Derek brought someone new, a woman from his recovery group who was quiet and kind. He looked happier than I'd ever seen him. When it came time for toasts, my father stood. I've given a lot of speeches over the years, most of them about Derek, his potential, his vision, his next big thing. He paused. I don't think I ever gave a speech about Rachel. Not once in her whole life did I stand in front of people and say, "This is my daughter, and she's extraordinary." His voice broke, "So I'm doing it now." He raised his glass. To Rachel, who achieved more than anyone in this family while we weren't watching, who saved us when we didn't deserve saving, who taught us that love sometimes means conditions and accountability and refusing to enable the people you care about. He wiped his eyes. I spent 30 years investing in the wrong child, not because Derek was better, but because I was too blind to see what was right in front of me. He looked at me. Rachel didn't need my investment. She built an empire anyway, but she deserved my pride, my attention, my belief, and I'm sorry it took a crisis to finally give it. My mother stood next, and for the record, she said, smiling through tears, I was wrong about everything, especially about what women need. Derek raised his glass last. To my sister, who saved my life by refusing to save me the easy way. He paused. I spent 40 years being the golden child, the special one who deserved everything just for existing. I never built anything real because I never had to. He looked at me. Rachel spent those same years being told she wasn't enough, and she used that to build something no one in this family could have imagined. He smiled. I'm grateful every day that she had conditions. They broke me apart so I could figure out who I actually was. 3 years after Ryan's text message, the loan still has 12 years left, and Derek has never missed a payment. Every check is proof I'm not who I used to be, he said, that I can earn things instead of being given them. Ryan finished his first year of medical school at Johns Hopkins, where he wants to build psychiatric clinics in underserved communities. Lily is a high school sophomore who writes poetry, plays soccer, and asks hard questions about why adults make the choices they make. Derek got married 6 months ago, a small ceremony with 30 people in the backyard of her parents' house. He cried during his vows, talking about how she was the first person who ever loved him for being ordinary. My parents gave them $5,000 for the honeymoon, the same amount they gave James and me. Equal, finally. People ask me sometimes if the conditions were worth it, if I should have just helped without strings, if love should come with requirements, if family means sacrifice without accountability. I tell them this: my family spent 30 years teaching me I was worth less than my brother, that my needs didn't matter, that my achievements deserved dismissal while his failures deserved celebration. The conditions weren't punishment. They were the price of admission to a relationship with someone who'd finally learned her own value. Some families rise to meet boundaries. Some people discover they're capable of change they never imagined. Mine rose, not perfectly and not without pain, but enough. My name is Rachel Morrison. I'm a senior vice president at one of the largest hedge funds in the world. I'm married to a man who sees me clearly. I have a brother who finally knows who he is. And I have parents who finally understand who I was all along. And I learned the most important lesson of my life. Your worth isn't determined by who believes in you. It's determined by who you become when nobody does. And sometimes when you finally know your worth, you can teach the people who should have known it all along.